Good morning, Year 10s. Here we are revising just before our exam next week, or you may be watching us another time to go over these topics. This is what I've got planned, but of course, if anyone here has got something else you want to do, just pop it in the chat and we can cover it. But these are some ideas I had for what we could cover this morning. But the first thing we're going to do is look at the past questions that have been asked for the beliefs and practices paper when they've been asked and what's been asked. So we can have a kind of glance across, get used to how the phrasing is going to be, and there might be something that really stands out to you, like, oh, I don't know how we'd do that. And yeah, and then we'll have a crack at the different topics. So it's a bit tiddly. Can everyone see that okay on their screens? Yeah, I can read it for you as well. Yeah, okay, perfect, brilliant. So we've got here Christian beliefs and teachings. We've got, I'm just going to actually take it by the 12 markers first. Let's look at the 12 markers first to see how they are. And if any of these stand out to you as like absolute clangers, I don't know how I'd do that, then we can think about it. But I think you're going to feel fairly confident, I hope, with all of these. So if God were loving, there'd be no suffering in the world, is what they asked in their specimen. That one is problem of evil. You can use lots of things from existence of God with that, can't you? The Bible tells Christians all they need to know about God's creation. So that one is really good for Bible authority. Again, existence of God helps with that too, doesn't it? So it's good we do that thing. A loving God will not send anyone to hell, afterlife. God cannot be loving because people suffer. Again, so don't forget, for Christian beliefs, you do have this theme of the problem of evil coming up, even though it's also in existence of God. The resurrection of the dead is the most important Christian belief. So for those ones, that's brilliant, because you can have all the different beliefs. Why are they the most important? And then you use those to sort of argue against each other. So that's a really good thing to do after this, is to sit and have all the different Christian, say for Muslim beliefs, why is it important? What's the quote? Why is it so important? And then you've got your counter if it's not the one that they ask about. For Christians, it is impossible to understand the nature of God. Now that one, it's hard, but because you do existence of God, again, I think you are at in a good position, because you can talk about immanence, transcendence, personal, impersonal. It's Christians, it's impossible to understand the nature of God. You could talk about the Trinity, how that's a mystery. You could talk about how it is possible to understand the nature of God because of the incarnation, because Jesus was born and we have the stories of his life and he's literally God on earth. So we can sort of look to the example of Jesus to understand the nature of God. So there's actually a lot that you could write in there. Is that the one? And then for the Christians, what the Bible says about creation is true. So they've kind of repeated what they asked in a specimen. So for you, is that the trickiest one, you think, 2021? So I think there's actually a lot that you can say, and you have covered that sort of stuff in existence of God as well. Specimen 2, for the Bible tells Christians all they need to know about God's creation. Yeah, so I guess that's basically sort of like the one from 2022. So it's asking, does the Bible tell you all you need to know? Do you need to have other sources of authority? Can we look to science to help us? So it's just kind of rephrasing in a bit different way. The Bible tells us they need to know about God's creation. Or do we need other sources of authority to tell us? A fundamentalist would say, yes, the Bible tells us everything we need to know. That's it. It's the word of God. Whereas a liberal Christian might say, well, we've got the Bible. That tells us why, gives us the reasons, gives us our purpose, tells us the meaning behind life. But what could tell us about how it's actually been? Well, I would use science. I mean, you could also bring in like, you could sort of say psychology, sociology, the humanities. You could bring in those things and say, these things tell us about God's creation and about the world too. But it really is a science versus religion one. Could you use different religions? No, not in this paper. Sorry, I'm just going to say a flat no, because you won't get the marks. I'm sure it would be a wonderful essay, and I'm sure it would be wonderfully written. You'd have wonderful quotes, but you won't get the marks. Remember, you're not just being big thinkers, even though you are trying to get marks. You are jumping through the hoops. You're playing the game, basically. You won't get the marks in this paper if you write about Islam in the Christianity one. You won't get the marks in the Islam one if you write about Christianity. I mean, sometimes I think it could be worth saying something like, the incarnation is the most important belief because it's so unique to Christianity. No other faith has a belief in the incarnation, so it shows how unique it is. But I am very, very clearly linking it to the Christianity. What counts as a valid religious teaching? Basically, do you mean as in like paraphrasing a quote or something, or what sources can it come from? So first of all, the sources can be, you can say the Bible, you can say as Jesus said in the Bible, you can say the Lord's Prayer, you can have things like the lyrics to Amazing Grace. I was going to talk to you about that later. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. We are doing Christian beliefs and practices for the exam on Monday, Leah. What was the other thing I was going to say? Well, these guys, it is the Monday, isn't it, everyone? These guys have got an exam. I don't know when you've got your exam. Right, so that is, you can have different sources. You can also have the Pope. You can also have quotes like for Bernadette in Lourdes, that sort of thing, from religious figures, as long as you say where it's from. In terms of paraphrasing, it just has to be sort of a well-known paraphrase, I guess, because obviously the Bible's written in Greek and Hebrew and bits are in Aramaic. It's not going to be like a literal, it's not going to be identical, just like with the Quran, it wouldn't be, would it? Identical, because it comes from the Arabic, but it has to be sort of what the quote is. And as an examiner, you are allowed to, you know, you're going to know it because you're a teacher, so you know the kind of quotes, but obviously if the wording's slightly different, then you just look online and then you go to, no, we're going to cover pilgrimage and sacraments and talk about Shia beliefs and practices as well. This is all the exam questions from the past, yeah. So as an examiner, you go online and have a look and see if there are translations that phrase it like that, basically. Is it really genuinely a quote that could be a quote from that source? Or is it just something someone's made up, like be nice? Jesus said, be nice. Jesus said, love people. Okay, love one another as I've loved you. Do you know what I mean? So you have to, as an examiner, and then if I don't know a quote, because I've marked papers where people are writing on Sikhism and Hinduism and Judaism and everything, I will then go to my chief examiner who knows more than me. So really, you want to make it as simple and easy as possible. So using those well-known quotes is good. Paraphrasing them is fine, but you can say things like, so for example, it could be credited, the one on creation, because you could say, oh, Christians believe this because in the creation story, it talks about Adam and Eve sinning or something. So it doesn't have to be a direct quote. Okay, great. So what is next? Yeah, we can come back to Hajj and everything later. So these are the questions from Christianity Beliefs. And you can have a look at the other ones as well. We have got, you know, things about creation, hell, heaven, Trinity. I think, is there any of these that would really stand out to you as too tricky and you want to have a talk about it? We've got two beliefs about Jesus's ascension, two beliefs about crucifixion, nature of God. Yeah, I think you're okay with that. You know, the Trinity and personal, impersonal, transcendent, immanent. Yeah, I think none of those are going to be too tricky. The 2022 5 mark. 2025 mark. Explain two Christian beliefs about the role of Jesus Christ in salvation. Brilliant. We're coming to that later. It's almost as if you knew. It's almost as if it was predestined that we were going to talk about that. The other thing is obviously for beliefs, and this is the same for the Muslim paper, beliefs, the 4 mark will always be an influence. The 4 marker in beliefs is always an influence. So it's always going to be how one of these beliefs influences somebody. What does it mean by influence? The way I think of it is belief in action. So what could I see? What changes are going to make to someone's behavior, or how are they going to behave, or what they're going to do that I'm going to see because of the belief? So another thing you could go away and do is list all those different beliefs, and then what are some actions that someone will do because of that belief? Okay, I believe in salvation. Now I'm going to go and try and help convert people so they can be saved. I believe in Tawheed as a Muslim, so now I'm not going to worship or pray to other beings. So Abla, that's the one I was stuck. She said, yes, science could be the other sources. But just remember to bring in, at least 2 religious quotes in each essay. So if you have to do that in the first bit, do it in the first bit. if it's like something that's sort of pitting Bible against something else. So get 2 in the first one, so you have done references to religion. Great. Okay, we haven't gotten to the bits I wanted to get to, but that's fine. So we look at the practices one. Okay, so in terms of practices, we have got here, let's have a look. The best, sometimes they ask this phrase, don't they? I think they did it a couple of years ago about Salah or Zakah being the best way to know God. So here you've got the best way to reach an understanding of God is by practicing prayer. So often they ask, it's not just like, what is the practice, but it's like kind of why are they doing it, or what are they learning about God or knowing more about God through doing that practice. So just remember that for your practices revision, that it could be something like, not rather than just what they do or is it important, it's like, what is it that this person is learning about God, or how are they knowing about God's nature or who God is? So it kind of links to the beliefs bit. So it's either through, like this one about prayer could be through communicating with God. Hi, Adrian. I don't know if I've met you before on here, but here we are. You're welcome. What else could be? This is religious studies. Yeah, do you do religious studies, Adrian? We do something else? Private worship, public worship, infant baptism, that's fine. Lord's Prayer is the only prayer that Christians need to use. So you do need to know what the Lord's Prayer is, why it's important for Christians. Christmas is an important celebration. That's fine, I think. Eucharist, Holy Communion, I think you should know about that. And baptism. So I think the trickiest one for that might be this sort of understanding God through prayer. Maybe if you didn't know what the Lord's Prayer was, you'd be stuck with that. Everybody know what the Lord's Prayer is? Thumbs up if you know what the Lord's Prayer is. Other prayers than the Lord's Prayer would be, you could say, rather than other like specific prayers, what I would say is the Lord's Prayer is a set prayer that people might say, but also for Christians important is informal prayer, where you are just speaking to God and communicating with God, and that's a very important part of prayers. Or you could say things like saying grace before you eat a meal, so thanking God before you eat a meal, but I don't know if you've learned about that. Or you could say prayer. Yeah, I would say informal prayer. And there's a word for when prayer is. Oh, okay. Well, you don't need to stay then, but it's lovely to meet you. Don't know how come you're here, but here we go. Lovely to meet you. So you could use intercession. Have you heard that word before? Intercession. I'll type it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat for you. Intercessionary prayer. Intercessionary prayer. So intercessionary prayer is where you ask God for help, or you pray for something like a natural disaster's happened, and you pray for people in church, or you pray for someone who's ill. So it's like a bit like a dua would be, or I probably said that wrong, in Islam. So it's like intercessionary prayer. So it's that's another type of prayer that could be for Christians. Evangelism is spread the word of Christ. Yeah, fantastic. So trying to help people become Christian. Yeah. What else would be important types of prayer? Jesus also said, pray for those who, forgive those who trespass against us. Brilliant. That's a fantastic quote, Max. Yeah, that's a great one that you can use in Crime and Punishment and Peace and Conflict as well, isn't it? Don't forget that's coming later. You can use these quotes in that one too. What else did I want to say to you? You could use, Jesus said, pray for those who persecute you. So you could say, Jesus teaches the Lord's Prayer, but he also teaches that we should pray for different things in the world, or different situations and things. So I guess, yeah, you could say, what is a liturgy? Brilliant. Is that, which one's that? Yeah, I didn't do liturgical worship with you yet. Let me have a look. Liturgy. Which question has liturgy in it? How did they phrase it? Oh, it's not there. Yeah, they might say something like liturgical worship is more important than non-liturgical worship. They haven't asked it, but they could, because it is quite a big part of the specification. So I could pop it on. I'll just make a new. We might not even do the thing I planned, but that's fine. So liturgical means there is a set pattern, words, phrases. Give me a second to let them up here. Liturgical means there's a set pattern, words and phrases. Non-liturgical means it's more free-flowing, spontaneous. I can't spell spontaneous. Who can spell it? Spontaneous. 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 It could be on the day. Whatever's happening on the day, or whatever whoever is doing it thinks needs to be on the day. So liturgical worship. An example of liturgical worship would be during saying the Lord's Prayer. During worship, set words and phrases for the Eucharist. Why do people like liturgical worship? Because it gives a sense of security. Have I spelled it right? Spontaneous? Spontaneous. What happens if you give a quote but it's similar and has the same meaning? Yeah, you can still get the marks. Yeah, as long as it's similar. Yeah, that's what I mean. Because Shabman, Jesus didn't even speak English, did he? So the phrase Jesus says is in Aramaic. So everything you're reading is a translation. So it's going to be, words are different, aren't they? Different translations give you different words. But as an examiner, as long as it has the same meaning and it is pretty much that quote, you know, as an examiner, I might be always used to using one type of Bible or one type of Quran, you know. So that's why, yeah. Security, but I think it's a gamble to just make them up like Amir said. I'm not going to advise you to do that. It's got to be something that is, you know, it's there. You know that Jesus said, okay, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But sometimes it's translated as, you know, want for others what you want for yourself. Or you might have, you know, in the Quran it says, anyway, yeah, sometimes it's different. Okay, let's go. So what we're saying, security, comfort, in knowing that it's always going to be the same. They know what's going to happen. They know what's coming in the service. They know they're going to stand up, sit down. I suppose it's a little bit like in Islam. I know I like to compare it, but you're not going to do that in the exam. I think it's a little bit like if you're doing salah and then you're praying and you have certain words that you say and certain actions that you do, and you know that, okay, well, now we're going to do it this many times and this happens, and now the imam's going to give the khutbah, and now we're going to do this. So it's having a set pattern. So that does happen in some churches, yeah? So everyone's doing the same prayer, no matter what the type of church. Don't say no matter what the type of church. Say no matter where the church is, because I go into a Catholic church in London, I know it's going to be the same as if I go into a Catholic church in Scotland, yeah? Because they're going to be doing the same thing. But if I go into a Catholic church in London, and then I go to a free church where they don't have any liturgy at all, it's going to be completely different. And they might be next door to each other. So it's more like it's the same type of church, does the same type of worship normally. So I know, okay, oh, I've gone to a new city today. I fancy going to church. I'm going to go to one that I normally go to, the same type, same denomination, because then I'm going to get the same feeling. I know what's going to happen. I know when I need to stand up, sit down, what I'm going to say, how it's going to be. And people like that comfort and that regularity. So, and they like that continuity because they feel like, well, people have done this for like, well, you know, 2,000 years. They've done the same thing, the same words, they've done the same actions, and they feel like there's this continuity. Particularly in the Roman Catholic Church, you have this idea that you've got these traditions that have always been there. So I'm doing what my family's done before and before and before. And people like that, don't they? So that's really good. But on the flip side, why might people prefer something non-liturgical? Might they like something that's not structured? What do we think? Non-liturgical, free, spontaneous on the day. People might like that because then you can pray about what you want or what you feel. Can help you feel like you've got this relationship with God where you are not just following a set pattern, but you can, you know. So when I was growing up, I loved my church because it was more non-liturgical. I loved those services where we just sort of, you know, prayed and spoke to God, and it felt very free, and it felt like I could express whatever, and I felt very free. As I'm getting older, I have really fond memories though of the liturgical worship. So I've got in my mind from being a child other services I went to where we always sang like the Lord's Prayer. We always used to sing it. There'd be a certain point in the service, everyone stands up and sings the Lord's Prayer. Okay, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Now, I sang that, I'm not even a Christian anymore. I sang that every Sunday, pretty much, for years and years. And it is in my mind, and that's it. When I'm like old and losing my memory, when they say old people can remember songs from their youth, I'm sure I'll hear that and I'll be like, oh, I used to go to church with grandma, because it's there, it's in my mind, it's imprinted. Yeah. We used to do something called the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you always. And then the vicar would say that, and then everyone would go and shake hands and do something called the grace. And so I just know it, like it's just there, it's in my memory. So for some people, liturgical worship helps you just it just becomes part of who you are, I guess, when you're doing it. I mean, I don't know if any of you find that with prayer. If you're Muslim, for example, you do the same actions time and time and time again. Some people might say, oh, that's a bit boring, or you're just doing the same thing. And other people will say, well, actually, you get this routine, it just becomes part of life. And I think there's strengths for both sides, And ultimately, you could say in an essay, let's say, oh my goodness, wouldn't it be amazing if they actually asked this week? But I don't know what they're going to ask. If they ask something like this, or that could be like set or informal, formal, if they ask about that, you could perhaps say a mixture. You could say, ultimately, it's down to personal choice. There might be different times in your life when you need different types of worship and different types of prayer. And ultimately, it's good to have both types, Yes, exactly. You recite certain verses, so it just becomes, part of, we used to recite the creed as well. So you can use the creed as a source of authority. So we believe in one God, maker of heaven and earth. I used to know it off by heart. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. Like we used to say the creed time and time again in church as well. So before we took the Eucharist, which is the bread and the wine. So this does link to sacraments, which we were going to do earlier. Before we took the Eucharist in my church, Church of England, we did these certain prayers and things like this. Always the same pattern, and then you knew you were building up to taking the Eucharist, and you just knew you had that pattern. So sometimes people really like that. But then sometimes, like when I was your age, I didn't really like that. I found it really boring. I thought it was really stuffy. I thought, oh goodness, we'll just do the same things everyone's always done. I'm new. I've got my relationship with God. I want to just tell God what I think. So I was in a worship band. We used to play music in the evenings. We'd just like rock out and I'd just sing away and say everything to God I wanted to say. And I felt very close to God. Does that make sense? So you've got these two types in Christianity. Sometimes one church does both. You just need to know that these different styles. Anything else about those two things? A liturgical is like creating community, but something is robotic because it's not as heartfelt. Yes, brilliant. I love that. It can be seen as not responsive to, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it can feel like memorization. Yeah, exactly. So, we should have done this as the debate, isn't it? Liturgical worship is better than none. You just remember it, but you don't mean it. Yeah, so for me, I can sing the Lord's Prayer to you, but I don't really believe it anymore, but I can sing it. So what does that mean, Does that get me points? Not really in Christianity. It's not about performing the prayer. It's about, So what's CCC? What do you mean? What have I got that's CCC? The Catechism of the Catholic Church? So it's like the teachings of the Catholic Church. Was it something to do with the Catholic teaching? Is it somewhere else you saw it on a PowerPoint or something? Yeah, so it's the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So that's another source of authority you can use. So there are teachings in the Catholic Church that are, slightly different, or not different, sorry, I shouldn't say that, that are like for Catholics explaining. So things like purgatory is in the Catholic Catechism, the Catechism of the Catholic Church, because it's not in the Bible, purgatory. We haven't talked about that either, have we? So purgatory is not in the Bible, but the Catholic Church have it as a teaching in their teachings, because for them that fits with the idea of God being loving and just, that people aren't just going to like go to hell forever, but they could go to purgatory. Yeah, you could definitely refer to it. So it's called the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Shall I find you that quote about purgatory, everyone? We're never going to get to pilgrimage, are we? I got up early this morning to make something on pilgrimage for us. Oh, yes, please, you want the quote. Okay. So what else would be useful from the Catechism? Anyway, I'll put the PowerPoint that I was going to do today what was I saying? On up anyway. I'll put it up anyway, and then you can use it. I thought we could do 2 hours. Is that all right with everyone? Do you want to stay for 2 hours? Oh, you got to go. Okay. Whoever wants to stay, we can. Oh, it's fine. You're saying on behalf of everyone else in here that that's fine. Thank you. That's very kind. You've appointed yourself as spokesperson. Yeah. And when we take a break, I might put a new link up. I'm recording anyway, so hopefully people will watch it later if they need to. Right. So what was it? The Catechism of the Catholic Church. So this is another source of authority that you can use. So let me see if I can find the quote that I wanted to. Basically, I've been helping another school, and I just showed them a quote on it from the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Purgatory. Yeah, so we've got purification so as to achieve the holiness to enter the joy of heaven. So you can have that quote on purgatory if you like. Purgatory. Because if you remember, purgatory is not in the Bible as such, but I guess it comes from the Bible's ideas of the nature of God, you know. Purgatory. Is there another one that would be useful? What else would be useful? So things about like not a bit more time consuming, like what's that, Abla? Oh, you're talking about Seneca. Okay, fine. Purgatory. Another thing from the Catholic Church would be on, this is for themes, maybe we'll think about that for next week, but things like contraception, and what else do we have, you know, to do with the family, divorce, all that kind of stuff. So I'll come back to that next week for the themes paper. Yeah, I'll give you some more things for the themes paper. But this one I think is a really good one for beliefs like this, because that's kind of one that's different, that you wouldn't have a Bible quote on if there's a question about purgatory or beliefs about life after death. Have they asked about purgatory? If they ask about life after death and you want a quote about purgatory, then you can use that, because there won't be one in the Bible, because it's not in the Bible. Okay? Everyone okay with that? So where were we? We were talking about liturgical, non-liturgical worship. Are you happy to just do a quick refresher on pilgrimage? Because it was something you've asked about lots of times, so I thought let's do that. And then let's have a go at a quick debate before, and then I thought we could do sacraments, but we kind of talked about that. And then maybe we'll do a quick debate before Amir goes, because I want to have it. Oh no, what? Are you okay? Okay, let's go. So, pilgrimage. Oh, I thought I made it that I was going to have them appearing, but here we go. I'll just talk to you. I don't like Christian pilgrimage. It's difficult. That's why I thought we should do it, because number one, I think you maybe did it for homework and not in class, which is fine. But I thought and I haven't got around to making the video that I said I would, so I thought let's just do this now, and then maybe I could even edit that one. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to talk to you about Christian ideas around pilgrimage, and for our specification, we need to know these two examples. You can use others if it's a question about pilgrimage in general, but they may ask you specifically for these two. And they may even ask you just about one, but for two different things that happens in one. So they asked this a few years ago about Lourdes, like two contrasting things that happen at Lourdes. And I'll come back to that with you in a second. So what is pilgrimage? It's a journey for religious reasons. We could say a journey to a special place of religious significance for religious reasons. But as long as you've got something about it being a journey and something about religion in there, you're showing that you're doing this journey for specific religious reasons. Things that it's going to have an impact on someone, it might strengthen their faith, or reasons why it might be important. If it's a 5-mark question, it might be about the importance of pilgrimage. You could say it gives time to focus on the Bible, helps you to feel like you are in a community, helps you to feel that there are other people in your faith with you. It could be helpful in difficult times. Some people might choose to go on a pilgrimage when they're making a difficult decision, when they're perhaps they're on a gap year before they go to university and they want to know what course they're going to do or where to go. Perhaps they've got different issues, and they think, okay, this is going to help me get some kind of breakthrough because I'm going to really focus. And it's a discipline as well, isn't it? It often involves walking a lot. People might walk to the site, or while they're there they might walk around, and it can be physically, it's a physical practice as well as just like being somewhere, if you know what I mean. Sometimes people might want to find an answer to something that they're really struggling with. But often people might go, particularly for Lords, if they're seeking actual healing and they want to be healed, or they've got some illness that they're living with, and they either want to be healed or they want to find a way to cope with living with it, basically. But what's important to know is that it's not obligatory. It's not obligatory at all. So yeah, I'll come to your question in a second. And not all Christians agree with it as that you have to do it. I suppose all Christians would say, yeah, you might want to go there. But some Christians will say, look, everywhere is sacred. That's right, Amir. Some Christians would say, look, everywhere is sort of sacred and special. And some Christians would say, you don't have to go on a journey to have that. The point of Christianity, these Christians would say, is that I can just be with God like this because of atonement, salvation, and everything. I no longer need to go somewhere or do something. It's just through that belief with God. And so, hi, Michaela, thanks for joining us. So we're just talking about pilgrimage. So for some Christians, it is important for all these reasons. For other Christians, you could say in the exam, and you might say more, yeah, you could just say for other Christians, pilgrimage is not such an important thing because any journey is special or sacred, or anything is important, not going to a special place, because that place doesn't have anything special about it anymore, because the whole of earth does through what Jesus did on the cross. Like now we just have this direct line to God. We don't have to go somewhere special or do something special. But if you are going on a pilgrimage, you're choosing to go on a pilgrimage, there may be set, there may be some pilgrimages you've got set like amount of space you might walk or set actions you might do, but really I think it's just down to you. That's fine, Michaela. It's just down to you what you want to do. And obviously if you go to Lourdes, you might choose to go to see the water, you might choose to bathe in the water, you might choose to go to mass. It's more about what you might go with a certain organization that's helping you do the different steps, but it's not the same as in like it's not necessarily about like a list of things that you have to do and then you've done it and you've kind of got your stamp, if you know what I mean. Maybe in the past there may have been times when it was more like that, when to get forgiveness for sins you might say, oh, I need to go and do this many actions, but that's not the important part of it really. Nowadays it's more, you choose to go there and to do whatever it is you feel you need to do to help with your faith or the reason why you've gone there. Sometimes people will obviously do certain actions like go and bathe in the water in Lourdes or go and pray. And if they are so I put this picture here because I thought this could help show the contrast between the two places. So Lourdes is on the left and you have got millions of people who visit there. So you've got obviously quite a big infrastructure. You've got gift shops, you've got coaches dropping off people, you've got coaches dropping off people who are in massive hospital chairs who are like literally on their deathbed, and they go there because they want to have prayer, maybe healing or some kind of resolution. So it's like very big and very busy. Like I told you, when I flew back from France last year, there was like a couple of really old gentlemen in their wheelchairs, and then they had like 5 or 6 nurses with them, and then a guide. And so there's a lot of people. It's quite busy. And then you have got the services there. So you might take the Eucharist there now because it's Roman Catholic. Yeah, that's Christianity. Sorry, I thought it was shorten it for us because it's Roman Catholic. If they're taking the Eucharist, how do you think that service is going to be if we link to what we just talked about before? Roman Catholic Eucharist, do you think that's going to be liturgical or non-liturgical? Okay, we're going to do the Eucharist now, everyone, or Mass, they might call it. We're going to have Mass this morning. It's going to be liturgical. Fantastic. So there would be like set patterns to then be able to take the Eucharist and that sort of. So what Abba said earlier about is there set actions. You could say, in Lourdes, yeah, midnight Mass, fantastic. Yeah, people have to do that just before Christmas, on Christmas Eve. So in Lourdes, you might say, there might be more of a structure. Number one, because there's maybe more people to sort of organize structurally, but also because people can follow the set patterns for liturgical worship to be able to take Mass at this site. So that's Lourdes. Why is Lourdes important? Because that's where Mary was said to appear to Bernadette. The water is seen as having miraculous properties. People go there with a hope for healing, but also just to have this connection to what's happened in the past. And the quote we came up with, wasn't it? Well, I didn't offer you happiness in this life, but the next. So you can use that in beliefs about life after death as well, if you want to. And then for Iona, This is different. It doesn't really have like a miraculous story, although some people believe in Iona it's very sort of close to heaven, or you can sort of, it's very thin. It's like a thin barrier between earth and heaven there. They feel like, some people say that certain places have this sort of closeness to God. Now, obviously, lots of other Christians would disagree and say, well, we're all equally close to God because of what Jesus did, and now anyone can be close to God. So not all Christians agree with that, but some would say it's kind of got this thinness between earth and heaven, and you can sort of feel closeness to God there. And it's where St. Columba, who was one of the early Christian saints, came and brought Christianity to Scotland. And so it's a connection with history as well. So you could say both of them have got a connection with Christian history, I guess. But it's a much smaller community, and it's a community of people who live there, who live in a religious community together. So a bit like you might have groups of people living with an aim and what they're doing together. So here they live together as a religious community. And there's a real focus on creation, nature, looking after God's creation, which is why I think the quote, and he saw it was good, is good. Because you could say, here they would focus on phrases like he saw it was good and the goodness of creation and our duty to care and caring for the environment together. They're sort of protecting God's world, and it's helping them in that. In Iona, you might be more likely to have young people going there together on a sort of, like I say, it could be university gap year, or it could be a summer holiday. It could be people studying and they go together and they have a real sense of, they might even travel together up from one part of the country to there. They have that excitement of traveling together, maybe being away from home for the first time, and then going up there and doing these activities, reading the Bible, and then worshipping, and then also, caring for the environment and things like that. So you've got two different sites that you need to know about, but generally pilgrimage in more generalness. And as Amir just put there, church like the Quaker, exactly, is a church you can use, or Society of Friends it's called. They do not have any sacraments, because they'll say, look, all of life is sacred, everybody's special, not these actions are special. We'll come to that in a second. Same thing, they would say, you might have Quakers who go to these places, and say, oh, I'm going to go there because it's interesting, but they don't necessarily feel that there's this spiritual thing happening when they're there in the same sense as others. So I kind of bring it back to me, don't I? When I was a Christian, I never went on a pilgrimage per se, like I never went and did a pilgrimage, but once I wasn't Christian anymore, actually, I did end up in Jerusalem when I lived in Palestine, and it was a very powerful experience for me, because I was walking on the very pavement that Jesus walked on, and I could see how, and some people even get, you don't really need to know this for the exam, but some people get something called Jerusalem syndrome. In Jerusalem, it's a psychiatric sort of a condition that people get where they literally believe they have become this person from the story. And I thought, no, that's ridiculous. I don't believe. I read it in the tour guide, And when I was there were literally people who, I saw someone like washing his hands, thinking he had turned into Pontius Pilate, who, sort of sentenced Jesus to death, and he washes his hands in the Bible. This person was just there, like, obsessively washing his hands, saying he was Pontius Pilate. People who think they're Mary, people who think they're Jesus, because you've heard these stories so much as a child. Like for me, I'd heard and read and heard and read and heard and read. To actually go there, it was very powerful. I don't even believe in God, but I had a powerful sense of something when I was there. So yeah, anyway, that's more for A-level, which we could talk about when you all come back to do the A-level. So pilgrimage can be very powerful and moving, and for some Christians it is a very important part of their faith that they go and undertake this, but it's not obligatory, it's not expected, and it's purely a choice really if you want to go or not, which I guess you could argue makes it more important because you're choosing to go. A bit like we said earlier, you're not doing the steps because you have to and just like robotically doing it. You've made that choice. Perhaps it shows a stronger commitment, a stronger will that you've chosen to go. I don't know. And then Max and I last week, we did Max? We did like an online debate about which one we thought was better. So you might have to, let's have a look at how it might look in the exams. So you might have something like, which of the following is a place of Christian pilgrimage? You might have give two ways that, or give two actions that happen on a pilgrimage, or give two sites of a pilgrimage. Here I've got explained two contrasting ways that they may perform a pilgrimage. All you would say is that in the second one, two contrasting ways. So one way that a Christian may perform a pilgrimage is to go to Lourdes, where this means that they are going to where Mary appeared to Bernadette, blah de blah. And then a contrasting way, some Christians may choose to go to Iona, which is where St. Columba, da da da, and they'll do this, da da. Or you could have like some Christians, when they're on a pilgrimage, will take the Eucharist, for example, at Lourdes. They'll be taking the Eucharist on the site where Mary appeared to Bernadette. Other Christians may spend time studying the Bible, caring for the environment, for example, in Iona. Da 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 da. Yeah. They did ask in 1 year, they asked for 2 contrasting ways Christians would do pilgrimage at Lourdes. So for that, I was thinking you could say sometimes people will take part in Eucharist there in the church, and then other times they'll go and bathe in the waters in hope to be healed. Oh, thanks, Michaela. So they could ask that as well. Scripture, I've given you 2 quotes. I hope you find them helpful. And then this question about all Christians should do a pilgrimage during their lifetime. I wonder if we should have a quick go. Eucharist, brilliant. Okay, that's answered my question, Max. We're going to move on to sacraments then. Okay, so sacraments are in Christian practices as well. Again, not all Christians do it. I can't believe it's only got one of the things stuck out. I'll just put everything on there so you can see it. So the sacraments are basically an outward sign of an inner spiritual change. That's one way to remember what it is. So a sacrament is something that you do physically, visibly, that shows something invisible and non-physical happening. But not all churches agree that there are such a thing called sacraments, and not all churches that have sacraments agree with what is a sacrament. So that's why I've got 3 here, but also we could have Quaker there as not having any sacraments either. Doesn't mean they don't do the action. So that's why I put the Baptist church there. The Baptist church does baptism, but they just don't call it a sacrament. No, I mean, Christians believe he never married, no. So, but he supports marriage in the sense that he says, do not commit adultery, and all that kind of thing. But he never married, is what Christians believe. So sacraments are an outward sign of an inner spiritual change. So, or a visible sign of something invisible that's happening to someone spiritually, or a change in the person. So baptism, marriage in the Catholic Church, funerals could be connected to it as well. So this idea that there's this change in the person happening. No, don't say funerals, actually. No, don't have funerals. So baptism, marriage. In the Roman Catholic Church, there are 7. We've got Eucharist, baptism, marriage, confession, anointing the sick, taking holy orders, which is like becoming a priest or becoming a monk or a nun, and reconciliation. So that can be seen as forgiveness for your sins. Like when you've confessed, you're then forgiven by God and you reconcile with God from your sins. But obviously that then feeds into work towards helping people reconcile as well. So you could talk about that in Peace and Conflict. So there are 7 in the Roman Catholic Church. These are all sacraments. So marriage as a sacrament is really important for obviously your themes paper. No, you don't need to know. No, you don't need to know that, Amir. If you look at the questions, in fact, what have they asked about sacraments before? Yeah, don't say funerals. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. That's talking thing about rites of passage then. Let's have a look. How have they asked? No, you don't really need to know that. You could say for the marriage and family unit, that there is a female pope, or there are female bishops in. We haven't wasted it. You can use it, but it's just they won't ask you specifically for it. So, which of the following sacrament is what commemorates Jesus' Last Supper? Then, in the same year, they asked on the Eucharist. So, Max, I'm going to come to that. I know you asked about that a minute ago. Then we've got what other sacrament question? Infant baptism and adult baptism, and they've also asked on persecution communion. Celebrating Holy Communion. So sometimes they call it Holy Communion, sometimes they call it Eucharist. Lord's Prayer, Christian Church, Lord's, ill treatment. That's what I want to check now, Shadman. Do they ever ask you? The only ones they're asking by name are Eucharist and baptism. We've got to explain the ways the Worldwide Church works for reconciliation. So it does say reconciliation and persecution, but that's kind of the Worldwide Church unit. The only sacraments they've asked for specifically are baptism, Eucharist, and then sometimes they've called it Holy Communion, but they've always put in brackets after it, haven't they? Look, they put in brackets here. And then we got the Last Supper. So they're quite cheeky, this exam board. They've called that one action Last Supper, Eucharist, and Holy Communion. have they called it anything else? Sometimes people call it breaking bread. Sometimes people call it, the last meal. But the words they've used are Last Supper, Holy Communion, and Eucharist. And all three of those are the same story from Jesus's life that are being reenacted in church. Why? Because Jesus said during this meal, take, eat, this is my body, the bread. He broke it. He said, take, eat, this is my body broken for you. And the wine, he said, take, drink, this is my blood shed for you. Why do I know this off by heart? Because every Sunday we said it as part of liturgical worship in my parents' church. So there we go. There's a link there for you as well. So there are, that's a really good quote for you to have. So Max, you were asking what Eucharist. So that's literally what that is. It's the Eucharist, Last Supper, Holy Communion. So it looks like you need to know those are three terms for it that the exam could use. Eucharist, Last Supper, Holy Communion. It's a really good one to know about for the belief section about Jesus's crucifixion as well. You're going to say something like, if there's a thing about teaching his crucifixion, just before he was crucified, Jesus said to his followers, take, eat, this is my body broken for you. So it's a really good quote to know. And it is very important to, pretty much all Christians do that. No, it doesn't mean sacraments. No, let's do a little PowerPoint slide for this to help us. It is I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to write it on. Let's do this. So, okay, let's do here. So, Eucharist. The Eucharist is a name for the for the eating the bread, drinking the wine that Christians do together in memory of Jesus' Last Supper. Should we say that? And in the Catholic Church and Anglican Church of England, it is a sacrament. It is one of the sacraments. Sometimes it's called Mass. Other names are Mass, Holy Communion, and what else did they say? The Last Supper. Sometimes it's called breaking bread, but I don't think they're going to ask you that on the exam, but it could do. So it is an example of a sacrament in the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England, but it's not directly what sacraments mean. Sacraments are any of those actions that are done. The time I think they might ask is, when they have at the beginning, they've got like the one word ones. They might say which of these is not a sacrament in the Roman Catholic Church. Maybe they haven't done that yet, but it could be. So that's why I think it's just useful to know what they are, to not be thrown by holy orders or reconciliation. Like sometimes there's little things like that. So what I think it might be as a 1 marker. More likely is something like a 4 marker, 5 marker, 12 marker on the Eucharist. What the different ways. Remember, the 4 marker in practices is always contrasting. So 2 contrasting ways Christians may practice the Eucharist. You could say in the Roman Catholic Church, it's seen as a sacrament, and wine will be drunk. But in nonconformist churches, it's not a sacrament, and often it will be like red currant juice or blackcurrant juice to allow for alcoholics to take part. You must have covered the Eucharist in class. Did you do the reenactment where you ate any of it or not? One year we did it. We brought all the bits. Oh yeah, and when I was here, we brought all the stuff in, and everyone had bread and wine. But we didn't pray over anything. Right. Okay. So the Eucharist. So this is, what else was I going to talk to you about Eucharist before we have a little break? Holy Communion, Last Supper. I'll go back to the PowerPoint slide that was on. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? And then we will take a little break in a moment. So, can we do a pilgrimage Kahoot? I can try and make one. It depends how long I've got to make one. I can try. Let me just go back to the sacraments here. So sacraments, it's like a word for, a service in church that has this special meaning. But not all churches, even though they do the service, might say it has that meaning, I guess. So there are 7 in the Roman Catholic Church. We've got the 2 that are in the Church of England plus 5 more, because it's not just like the Bible, but it's also the traditions of the church that have built this up as a thing. Whereas the Church of England, after the Reformation, which hopefully you know about, when Protestant Church was formed, they said, okay, we're not going to have all those as sacraments. We're just going to say these two are sacraments because these are the two that Jesus was really, really big on. One, the Last Supper, he literally said you have to do this. And secondly, baptism is very, very important. Jesus said you have to go and baptize people. So you need to know that there's different ways people might do the Eucharist, and then also different ways that people do baptism. Perhaps easier because you've got infant baptism, adult baptism. I have got a video on that if you need to revise that. So helpfully, you've also got the Baptist Church, who obviously do baptisms if they're called the Baptist Church, and they are very big on adult baptism. They do not agree with infant baptism. It's your choice as an adult to be baptized, but they do not have any sacraments. They say, look, it's not a sacrament. It's not doing, the action is not doing this special change. It's God. The action is just a symbol. It's just showing you what God is doing. So it's really about the significance of the action. Yeah, I don't know how they might ask. Could they ask that? Could they ask that as a 12 marker? Sacraments are I don't think they've ever phrased it quite like that, but they might. It might be. How might they ask it? Let me just have a look. Christian practices. Only adults should be baptized. Celebration of Holy Communion is the most important part of Christian life. So you could sort of say it is, but there are also other sacraments in the Catholic Church: Christmas celebration, Lord's Prayer, infant baptism. They get harder every year. I don't think they get harder every year. I think only adults should be baptized in the Christian religion. When I saw that last year, I was like, yes. Because, you know, I think it's easy. I think it's, for me, I think writing an essay on infant versus adult baptism, boom, easy. You know, or Easter versus Christmas. Look at that. Christmas is the most important, you know. Again, like I said, for beliefs, where you can list the different beliefs and why they're important, same for practices. List the different practices, why they're important. If you're going to say why Holy Communion is important, you can also then flip it and say why the other ones are more important. So you can plan 6 essays in one if you have 6 beliefs and why each of them are important, isn't it? You know, then you would choose in the exam, well, that's the one it's asking me about. That's the one I'm going to counter it with. Same with the 5 pillars. Why is each of them important in Islam? And then you can flip it. But let's take a little break, everybody. I can maybe, you have to go now. You won't be coming back after the break. Good luck, everybody. And Amir, good luck. And will you be here next Saturday, Amir? We'll do one last one next Saturday. If we don't get to do a Kahoot today, I will try and do a Kahoot with you next week. Yes. Okay. So what time should we come back, everyone? 1:15? I'll pause the recording, and then I was going to talk to you about salvation, but maybe you can look at that yourself another time. We can come back to that, or we can talk about it if you want to after the break. And let's put a break on here. Okay, great. So I'm going to pause the recording, and we'll come back at 1:15. Okay. We may have to leave and come back at 1:15 because I've just done something stupid. We'll come back at 1:15. Okay, everyone? I'll resend the link. Okay, right, great, good, well done.